City Council Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met in council chambers Thursday, May 29th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matters listed below. Notice meeting was posted on April 18th, 2025 at 9:36 a.m. In attendance from the committee, we have Councilors Jerslow and Cohen. Absent are Councilors Morcillo and Varela. From the city, we have Public Art Director Julie Berry, City Solicitor Beth Renard, and Special Events Coordinator Jeremy Fisk. My daughter's asking me for more time on Roblox. So I guess we're here to discuss the ordinance to amend an ordinance relative to vending. So the background on this, and I guess we'll let Jeremy and Julie and Beth talk through that a little bit, is that we had a pretty bare bones vending ordinance. 2022, I believe, Salem Main Streets received a grant to start a process to audit the policies in the ordinance and how it's being enforced, and then to try to rewrite it to make it more efficient, more equitable, and cover more of what we do today. But I don't know, which of you three wants to cover sort of the background behind this?
I'm happy to cover it, but you don't
Like literally eat the microphone.
I'm happy to jump in on that. Thank you for the opportunity. Hi, I'm Julie Berry. I'm the Senior Planner for Arts and Culture for the City of Salem. And as the councilor mentioned, this was sort of an outcropping of a grant that was facilitated by Main Streets through the EDA. So the Economic Development Association of the federal government gave us a grant through the city's Economic Development Department and Main Streets. They conducted a deep dive survey into our community around events. This was right after COVID. It was sort of about how to save events, how to make sure that our community continues to have a robust event life and framework for them to operate in. So it was about removing barriers to access, clearing pathways, creating fair and equitable systems. And so this report that they provided to us that was done during the study, some of the suggestions in there were refining our vending policies, creating better application practices, things like that. So the city's been slowly and surely going through those recommendations and trying to implement them where we can. Jeremy and I have been working on that since he started with the city, really. And I've been working with Kylie and Main Streets, John at the Creative Collective. We talked with Renus with the Chamber, and so really tried to get some input from them, as well as utilizing the results from this grant research to guide our recommendations for the council to consider. So the research has much more than just this ordinance recommendations to it. Coming out of that we're affecting change elsewhere, but this ordinance will really help us to provide a level playing field for all of the events that happen here in Salem. So creating transparent pathways, equitable access, and also enforceable regulations are really the top three priorities in the recommended changes.
Some of this, Julie, was also to recognize the fact that a lot of events happen not as individuals, but as as a larger group that might bring in multiple vendors. And I think to take some of the, to understand it right, to take some of the administrative burden off of the city, that we have an event with 100 vendors. Not all 100 vendors are applying for licenses. It's just the organizer, correct?
That is correct, yes. So it would help lessen the administrative lift. Our current ordinance is written in such a way that requires each individual vendor to come before the licensing commission to seek approvals, and they could charge up to $200 for each vendor. And it just hasn't been an equitable or enforceable, really, ordinance. So this new framework provides that.
And potentially, I would assume, to remove some liability from the city to make sure that things are clear and that we're treating everyone exactly the same. Any questions from the council about the ordinance generally, and then we can look at the red lines here and ask any questions we have around that. Councilor Jerslow.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. I just had a question on the fees. How did you come to that? I wrote email and I didn't. Thank you.
I think your mic might not be.
So the application fee of $110 covers the licensing board clerk. So what happens is, the application comes in, it gets scheduled for the licensing board meeting, gets put on the agenda, the meeting happens, Melissa would process the payments, and then issue the license. So that takes about 2 hours of her administrative time, and that's at $50 at straight time. Plus, in addition to that, I oversee the licensing board and review all of those applications. I go on to the portal and approve them ultimately when they are completed. So that's how the application fee was developed. On the vendor fee for example, the $200 for the non-Salem applicants for a smaller event, the enforcement and the planned overtime, Melissa would go out on the weekends to make sure they have the actual number that they said they were going to, the locations where they are, and so an overtime with benefits is $75 an hour. And we estimated 2 hours for that, plus $50 towards any maintenance of the use of land as well. That is discounted, that is cut in half for the Salem-based organizations. And so this was brought before the licensing board as well. Julie and Jeremy had done a great job. I put it in form for the ordinance. We brought it to the licensing board. We had input from Kylie and others, Renus, John from Creative Collective. And so we have the fees set at a minimum number to encourage these events that bring people into the downtown. This does not cover those big events at Halloween time, like the Truck Festival. Those are covered by an RFP. At a local park.
So, so each vendor, each tent has to pay a $100 fee? Or is that just the organizer pays $100, and even if they have 10 of them, that's all they're paying?
Right, so if you look at there's a box in the schedule of fees.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's essentially $10 or $20 if you're out of Salem per vendor for up to 10. And then it's additional $5 over 10 for each vendor.
Do you think that's enough where they have to hire, I know they hire police details.
They don't hire police details for these small events.
Police department does, if there's a fair going on, they always put extra people on downtown. So that covers, does it really cover like a police officer, somebody that goes out and enforces the organizers, and also the DPW that have to come and pick up the trash after, or anything else that they have to take care of? Do you think that's a small fee for $100 if you have 10, tents on the common, the damage they do? That's one of the biggest thing, the Friends of the Common, they always, that there's not enough money to replace the grass, that they have to reseed all the time, or even down the Willows, when they have, I know the Jazz Festival, there's a lot of tents and vendors. The damage it does this $100 actually?
So, the park department has their own fees, so they charge $25 per vendor to cover for those things. And if it's large enough and they require a police detail, they have to pay for that as well. But these small, like the Salem Arts event that might have, I don't know, how many vendors, maybe 25, 30 vendors, they don't require a police detail.
Well, I know the police will put an extra body down there, though, to walk around downtown. They do it. So I'm just saying, why should the residents, the taxpayers have to pay this extra money and these people, $100 for 10 of them? They're making hand over foot in these,
I'm going to defer to Julie, but I don't believe the police have details for these small events.
Thank you for the question. And I think this is something that we have been trying to right-size, right? Like the fees are, just sort of generally speaking, we've gotten pushback from both sides, right? It's not enough because there is hard and fast costs, infrastructure, property use, staff time. Those are real costs to our city. But then the flip side of that same coin is that if we charge too much, we deter the events that attract so many visitors and tourists to our downtown. And so that we lose that attraction. So trying to balance that and make sure that we're not pricing out those smaller organizations that do activations in our community, while also acknowledging that these are hard, fast costs. So it is a tricky thing, and so we're open to recommendations. To answer your questions about those costs, the police often don't do details on the smaller markets in Derby Square. For Arts Festival, for like the bigger festivals and fairs, those 100% require, like Pride Parade, Haunted Happenings, all of those larger community events do and absolutely pull our police resources, and they're required to hire details specifically for their events. So, but like a smaller arts market in Derby Square, they might get a patrol, like a foot patrol officer that passes through, but it's not a dedicated officer unless they are paid to be there by the event organizers, to my understanding of how the system works.
I just think the fees are very low for what, I mean, that's, $100 for the, the organizer. So if they have 10, that's $10 like a tent is paying. I mean, $100 each, they sell 4 T-shirts and they've made up the money. So I think these fees are way too low, and I think the city is like selling themselves out because I think people are still going to come. They make a ton of money in these, events with all the tourists.
So the fees started, oh, sorry, please.
Can I just, real quick on this topic? I think that to get to Councilor Jerslow's question is, are the fees covering the costs associated? I know the mayor has made a push to ensure that these events, especially around Halloween and other events, the cost of the administrative cost is covered by the fees. Can we say that these costs are fully covered, or as covered as we can quantify here by the fees that we're charging? Because it's not, I guess, we're not trying to make this, the goal is not necessarily for it to be affordable, though of course we want that, but the goal is to cover, that the fees cover the costs, right? And then I'll get to Councilor Cohen.
Yes, so this vendor ordinance does not cover those large events, number one. Number two, there are the fees that are charged separate and apart from this by the Park Department, and the Old Town Hall, there is an application fee for that as well. So we have met with organizers of these small events and feel that this is sufficient to cover our costs, our admin costs, our producing of the badges or whatever it might be.
So this is covering the administrative costs that we incur here. If it requires an RFP, that's a completely separate situation. If it is held on the Common or the Willows, those are the park fees that are also charged separately. What this ordinance specifically is dealing with is the fees that we're incurring administratively, and we think that this
To
covers.
the licensing board, yes, the licensing department, yes.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. So since there's 3 of us, I'm going to word it my own way. I believe that in our discussions at the council that we can't, the fees must correlate to the cost. It's not necessarily a city thing, but the fees must correlate to the cost. And as Julie said, there are other factors that contribute to the cost, whether it's the application fee for Old Town Hall or, other things. Most of the events that require extra costs, whether it's from DPS or the police, those have separate contracts. So it's not just an RFP, it's a contract. So I'm actually comfortable with this because I really feel like the benefit to the community is more than just, are we covering the cost? If, it sounds like the cost of the administrative work is being covered by this fee, and if there are other necessary costs that need to be covered, we can address that in other ways. But this is really just to address the licensing of the vendors.
Did you want to ask any more questions, Councilor Jerslow, or make any more statements?
Would you know what the organizers pay for, or what they charge, like an organizer would charge for each, person that wants to come and set up?
hold on one second.
It's all different depending on what the event is. I mean, it can be as small as like farmers markets, or I think they only charge like 20 bucks. Whereas I think haunted happenings can charge up to 250. So it's really a sliding. Like mass poetry, I think, gives most of them out for free, or charges a very nominal amount to cover whatever costs that it is incurred. But it's really a huge sliding scale, and that was one of the issues we had in terms of figuring out the price.
Yeah, I just don't agree. I think the city's selling themselves out with these fees. I think they should be more, these people are going to come, the events are going to come, the organizer's going to come. The organizers are probably walking away with a ton of money, and we're left with, costs of DPW, the police, and anything else the city incurs. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Cohen.
Yes, so I respectfully disagree. A lot of these are, like the farmer's market is not necessarily intended to be a money-making event, and many of these events are run by nonprofits, or not-for-profit. I do believe that the bigger ones, the ones that we've done on Charlotte Fortin Park or in the Common, the Fiesta and those, we should make sure that we're covering all the costs and making sure that any incidental costs or, unintended consequences like, the Common being, harmed in some way, whether it's grass or something else, is part of the contract. But I think a lot of these, I used to participate in the farmer's market, and they allow nonprofits and city staff to have tables there. We don't charge them.
While we bring up the farmers markets, can you cover the differences with the farmers markets versus other markets? I think there was different, because there's a food element there, correct?
Because there's a public benefit for having fresh foods available to our community, we provided a carve-out for them so that they pay the application fee, but they do not pay the per vendor fee because of the benefits to the community. And because they offer folks that have, SNAP, to purchase vegetables. So we made a carve-out for that.
You want to move to the red lines and see, just to walk through what's been changed in here? I know there's a lot here, Beth, but do you want to take us just through this, the changes in definitions and?
Sure. So the first section, 26, has definitions. We cleaned up the language. Thank you, Julie and Jeremy. Cleaned up the language so it's clear who is covered and who's not covered. So you'll see that all of our, we're requiring that there be an event, that there'll be an event organizer, and each event vendor is responsible for their displays. We're going to have two types of events. One, which is an organized event, and then when we have parades, you'll see those folks that walk around with selling of the balloons and novelties like that. So those have a separate ordinance requirement. They come in about a week earlier. Melissa gives them a license. She does the quarries, and there's a separate fee for them. So we have two types of vending. We have the individual vendors that are part of an event, and then we have the transient vendors that just work primarily the parades. So those are the definitions. We cleaned up that language. Go ahead.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. We're talking about this vendor ordinance as if it's like just events, but in the definition, and I think it's section 3, it also covers door-to-door solicitation.
Correct.
So I think, I've been harping on, how a lot of our homeowners and residents, ratepayers for electric are getting scammed, and this really, in some ways, protects them because they, as part of this, there's a whole series of things that they have to do to register with the police.
Right, that's always been the case.
Right, but but that's one of the definitions. So I just want to
Correct.
make sure that
Right.
that it's not, this ordinance isn't just for events. It's actually for any solicitation.
Right,
Yep.
yeah, that's always been in there, but we did tweak that, correct. Moving on, we did define what vendors are allowed to do. There are a lot of requirements that have been in place for years that are also part of this ordinance. Just name a few, like the ADA requirements to keep a 4-foot pathway.
Could you let us know where we're at right now in the red lines, just to make sure?
Looking at the vendors, we've got event vendors, a definition.
This is 2856.
2856, I'm sorry, yes. And we are spelling out the procedures for obtaining a license. So if you look at the third page of the document, all the requirements are set forth herein. They have to go before the licensing board. They have to let us know 2 months in advance that they're going to be holding an event. They need to make sure that they have their proper health inspection reports listed. They have to have their sales tax documents provided and listed, posted rather. We do require insurance, so that's in here as well. What else? We set forth the vendor fees, obviously, that we've been discussing. And then we have that carve out again for the Farmer Series allowance. That's in section 57. Moving on to section 8. This is where the identification comes in, displaying your license. This is often an issue at larger events.
Sorry, real quick. I just, on section 2858,
Yep.
just channeling Council Morcello here. We want to add an S after organizer. 2856.
Yes, got it.
So unless anyone wants to make a motion on that one.
I move that we, in section 2858, after the word organizer, we add an S, make it organizers.
I second that.
Okay. Actually, we'll take that right at the end, actually. I don't think we needed a motion for that.
Moving on to section 59. This is where we codified all the rules. So you can only have a 10 by 10 area for your vending unless you've paid for 2 spots. You need to maintain accessible pathways. You need to make sure that your licenses are displayed. You need to make sure that, what else do we have here? 10 by 10 tent, no logos on the canopies. So these are all the rules that we've actually had enforced for quite a while. Those are listed here.
And that's no logos for outside companies, right? So the event themselves, for the group themselves can use their own logo, but not like Budweiser. Yeah.
No Budweiser, right. And then we set up the, in the next section, number 60, we have the, if you are violating any part of the ordinance, what will happen? And so what we have here is, you get a warning, and then the second offense would be a $150 fine. Third offense can lead to a revocation of your permit. This is if the vendor is doing something wrong, and then the event organizer is also responsible, so we have a list of fines there.
Can you talk through very briefly the process for the offenses?
So event vendors, if they're in violation, let's say they have a Budweiser display on their tent, they'd be given a warning, please take that down. If they continue to do that and they get a ticket, it would be a $150 fee. The third offense, if they continue to not comply, then they could be asked to leave the event. The event organizer is the same thing. If, let's say, they're not requiring their vendors to put up their sales tax information, we'll tell them again, please make sure that you are compliant. And if they have more vendors than they're supposed to have, they need to pay that fee. If they continue to do that, they could be subject to additional fines or revocation of the permit. Did I get that right?
Can I ask,
Councilor Cohen.
you can call me Council Mercil. Thank you, Chair. Through you to anyone over there. I know that we're strengthening the ordinance, but do you have a rough idea? You know, in the past, have there been a small amount, a significant amount of violations that the city has to deal with?
So we do get a good number of community concerns around how vendors conduct themselves sometimes. Like maybe they'll prop things up against a private property, or they'll block ADA access to the home, or, you know, access to the home. And so we actually don't have any regulations in our current ordinance that allow us to restrict where those vendors go on those private properties, because there's not like specific language on that. So the order of magnitude of the number of offenses, I don't have a specific count for that, but they do happen, and these interventions would help us protect our residents as well.
Councilor Giselle.
Thank you, Chair. So the person that goes out to enforce these to see if there's any violations, do you know how much that person, it costs for that person from the city to go out there for, like, say, a whole day or 4 hours? So is this $100 fee covering there? And after, I know, like, after the farmer's market, there's a lot of trash, cardboard that the city has to pick up. With all our trash fees going up, is this $100 fee actually covering any of that extra, you know, trash that they have to cardboard that we have to pick up as a city? I'm just thinking the fees are too low.
So the fees are currently calculated for, on a scale, for the number of vendors that you have for the enforcement portion of it. So the fees do go up the larger number of vendors that you have, because the enforcement lift will increase with that. Right now, they're calculated at about an hour to an hour and a half of the enforcer's time, so they're not there for the entire event. They just go in, do like an inspectional services kind of check, and then they leave. And so that does scale based on the number of vendors at the event. So that's how we got into that number. And then additionally, for like the trash or the state of the property, that can be addressed through the security deposits that we secure for the use of Derby Square, for example. So through the Derby Square application process, so they have to apply to use Derby Square, and they could have a performance. Maybe they don't have any vendors, so this doesn't ever touch their event. But they still have to apply to use Derby Square, and there's a small application fee to use Derby Square, and then a $250 refundable security deposit that if you leave the property in good condition, you get that money back. But if you leave your trash everywhere, you don't get that money back, and we retain it to conduct cleaning in the space. You're welcome.
Councilor Cohen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had brought up the violations because I actually believe that codifying the stuff that we're doing in the ordinance will hopefully discourage, you know, some of the things that are happening. We're finding that with outdoor dining. Now we're in the 3rd year or whatever of outdoor dining, and we're noticing that restaurants who either didn't know what to do or couldn't figure it out or were just violating it are complying a lot better because they know that there's some kind of consequence. And it's very similar because just like outdoor dining, you know, the leverage is to remove their ability to do this in the future.
Keep moving. Yep.
The next section is the transient vendors. And again, this is administered through the licensing department. This is for those folks that carry around the balloons, and there's a separate fee for them. The fee has been historically $125 in the last couple of years. They come in with already holding a state license. So this fee covers Melissa's time to issue the license. She actually prepares a laminated badge, and we do a query check on that. No questions there. We are proposing to delete The charitable section, which is 62, because the anti-aid amendment does not allow us to treat vendors differently based on your status. So that is deleted. Let's see, we're not making any changes in the next few sections until we get to
Transient photographers?
transient photographers, which I'm not sure how this evolved and why this is in here, but we don't really have any requests for that any longer, so we propose to delete that whole section. That takes us to the end of the edits.
Any further questions on these, specifically on these red lines here? Councilor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. So I just want to go back to something that you said, Julie, about Derby Square, Old Town Hall. They have, and this might be for Beth, I'm not sure. They have vehicles so that whether it's a security deposit or something written into the contract that could address some of the costs that Councilor Jerslow was talking about. And so maybe this is for Beth. So for things that are on parks, you know, like Forest River or the Common or whatever, and I'm just not that familiar, I'm assuming that Park and Rec has a similar process.
Yes, they go before the Park and Rec Commission, there's a fee established, and they would require any particular details. I can get more information from Trish about all that they require, but there is a separate process through parks.
So that potentially would cover a lot of the costs that, this is really just for the processing and enforcing of the license.
The vendors, yes.
Any questions, or Councilor Jerslow?
I'd like to make a motion to raise the fees from 100 to 200, and for the outside organizers from 200 to 300.
Councilor Jerslow moves to raise the fees. Can we repeat that? 100 to 200 on?
For 1 to 10, and 11 to 100, 200, and for the outside organizers from 200 to 300, and 11 to 100, well, it's the same as 200. I would do then 300 plus 10 each.
Okay, on Councilor Jerslow's motion, under discussion. I'm sorry. Councilor Jerslow's made a motion. Is there a second? Seeing none. Any further discussion? Councilor Cohen?
I'm going to go back to the original thing I said in the beginning of the meeting. It's not a desire, it's the costs are supposed to, the fees are supposed to correlate to the cost. So if we don't know that there's addition, you know, our solicitor said, this is what the cost correlation is for the actually licensing and enforcement for this. It doesn't address all the other things that could be addressed in other places like Park and Rec or Old Town Hall or whatever. So I'm at least comfortable with it now. Just as has happened in the last year and a half, the city has, through the council, we have reviewed and raised fees on a lot of things because we found that it wasn't mirroring what the cost was to the city. And I'm assuming that will happen here if we need to.
Beth, would it be fair to say that if the concern were the maintenance of the common, which is a concern, that would be a different ordinance that we'd be looking at, or that would be the different
Yes.
policy?
Under the parks section of the ordinance, there is a $25 fee that goes to the common neighborhood fund.
Any further questions, comments, discussion, any motions? Councilor Cohen.
I would like to move that we refer this ordinance as amended to the full council with a positive recommendation.
And that includes the amendment on section 2858 to add the S after ordinance.
Yes, with the, yes.
Okay, as amended. Councilor Cohen moves to refer the ordinance as amended, including the amendment that we discussed here, to the full council with a positive recommendation. I'll second the motion then. Seconded by the chair. All those in favor? I see 2 hands plus my own. Any further discussions? Any further motions?
You want to do this one?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Councilor Jerslow moves to adjourn. All those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you both, or thank you all 3 of you.